Good evening. I'll call the Lisbon Town Council meeting for August 18th, 2015 to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. It appears our 6 o'clock notice worked just fine this week. So with that being said, we'll move on to the first item, please.
That'll be roll call. Counselor Garrison?
Present.
Counselor Lent?
Here.
Counselor McTevier?
Here.
Counselor Bickford?
Here.
Counselor Crafts?
Here.
Counselor Pesky?
Here.
And Counselor Brunel.
Here.
And the next item, please.
Good news and recognition.
Open the floor for any good news and recognition from council. See none. Next item, please.
Is a public hearing, the fireworks ordinance.
Open the public hearing for the fireworks ordinance. Mr. Wells.
Ken Wells, Forest Hill Avenue. I was reading the minutes that came out, or the notes that came out, and I see that you still guys are asking the permits to be obtained by the fire department. And I was just wondering, on your website for the burn permit, you say it can come from the comm center. So why get a fire permit from the comm center and a fireworks ordinance from the fire department? Why not just have the comm center do both? Just to make that suggestion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mike Hebert, 106 Frost Hill Ave. I just want to go ahead and say that I am for fireworks. You know, I think for the certain time of year they do.
Can you
serve
pick the mic up,
purpose.
Mike?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For the time of year they serve the purpose. It's patriotic. You know, the festival and the 4th of July are one thing, but I know Frost Hill Ave is dominated by fireworks. I mean, it is a every night occurrence, and it starts at like 9 o'clock, and it'll go sometimes 9 to midnight. And I mean, sometimes they start at 10:30. They'll go to 1 in the morning. I mean, I call the cops all the time. You know, and it's one of those things where by the time dispatch sends the police there, the fireworks are done, cops go by, and then they start the fireworks back up again. You know, it's a hit or miss thing, so I question how enforcement ever really happens in the first place. But, you know, I agree with something happening with it, 'cause, you know, it's, for me, it's out of control on that side of it. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Dot.
Dot Fitzgerald, Lisbon Falls. I haven't read the newest one, but from what I understand, 4 citations and then you get fined. What about 3 strikes, you're out? 3 citations and get fined, and big fines. I mean, fireworks, like he said, it's a big problem.
What do you mean?
Well, you was in the ordinance, from what I read recently, if someone is shooting off fireworks, they get 4 citations.
A citation is a fine.
It goes up incrementally each time they get one, up to a maximum. I forget what the max was, $500?
500.
A citation is a fine.
Okay, so they get 4 warnings, is that it?
No?
No,
Oh, no warnings.
I think you better go read the ordinance.
yeah, those
Better
are
read
just
it again.
Yeah, yeah.
different levels of fines. First time you get a certain fine, second time it's more, third time it's more.
Well, they need to make big fines.
Yep.
Needs a deterrent.
Mr. Neto?
Now, my name is Richard Nettle. I live in Lisbon Falls, in Colonial Gardens. On fireworks, why not certain areas, and some communities have done this, certain areas where there is no fireworks, where you have a big problem over there, that would take care of your problem. If they do, it's a big fine. That's something else to think about.
Thank you. Anybody else? Chief Brooks?
Just kidding. First is, I want to thank council for the restrictions they've added on cutting back on some of the time. I think that was clearly needed. And the other point I would like to bring up is, we have the fine structure, but I maybe I misunderstood the way it was written, and you had the intent of collecting attorney costs for prosecution at all levels of the fine. I don't know, because it's only mentioned in the final fine level. So I thought that might be a point of interest to, 'cause
The
court
intent was
costs-
it to be able to collect the court costs at all levels of the
Okay.
fine.
The way it's written, and I looked at it, it only brought that point up on the final level, so that was my concern, to make sure that we had no cost in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising those concerns. Anybody else? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Move on to the next item, please.
Is audience participation and response for agenda items?
Open the floor for audience participation. Mr. LaRochelle.
Brian LaRochelle, Lisbon Falls, Chair, Council, thank you for the opportunity. This is going in response to the upcoming discussion about the referendum coming up. And again, this is just not to beat anybody up, this is just a feeling and a concern, so I figured I'd address the council directly. When I actually was coming on the council, it was just about the time that council form of government was actually developed. I was not the first year, but I was shortly after. And one of the biggest concerns that came up with that was the people in town thought they would actually lose their say or their voice in the community going away from a town meeting form of government to council. And I, full-time was on council, I assured everybody their voice was heard. And the two times that we actually promoted as a council and as a community when you'd be heard is at public hearing and when you went to a referendum vote. Those are your two times as a community you could voice your opinion, and the council was there to serve the community in that manner. I'm actually talking tonight about the referendum vote because I'm kind of a little bit concerned about some of the actions that's happened in the past, the votes, the way the votes have gone. I've heard the idea of special interest groups. When we have several hundred people in town go to vote, that to me is not a special interest group. Those are the 700 people that make everything happen in this town, whether it's community events, sports, cleaning up the sides of the road, running businesses. It's not a few people. This is several hundred people that actually voice their concern. Before we actually go to do another referendum vote that costs us a few $1,000s every time, I would really encourage and actually hope to see that the council reach out and the school board reach out for you guys to get together and actually have a open debate or discussion. Debate probably ain't the proper word, discussion. So we actually, when as a community, we go to spend another $3,000 or more for a vote, that it actually is going in, serving what the community has actually voted for. The community voted down the school budget because it was too low. Not saying it needs to be brought up a lot, I'm not saying either side is right or wrong, but I think as a community, we would hope and at least respect, and I beg you in a sense, to get together and actually talk this out so the next vote goes to something the public can actually vote on and at least feel that their vote is actually being heard, because as of right now in the community, it really doesn't sound that way. Just a little bit as a community-involved person and as a business owner, one of the things that really kind of bothered me recently is my daughter actually was applying for a school position here in town. And out of the district, I mean, I'm talking in Portland, South Portland area, when she was with another group of teachers, they actually told her not to bother because Lisbon wasn't a place to go apply for a school job because their community doesn't support their school, which to me really hurt a lot. She actually took a job somewhere else because I actually said the same thing. You know, why would you apply for a job they don't even know if they have funding for? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So as a community, I just beg you folks to actually get together, come to some resolve, and actually next time we go vote on something that the community asked for. Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, move on to the next item.
Is the consent agenda? Any counselor wishing to have any item removed, they do so now. Order 2015-235 to approve the minutes of July 28 and August 4.
Open the floor for motion.
I wasn't here, but I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Order passed 7-0.
And the next item, please.
Council orders, resolutions, and ordinances. Order 2015-236, the fireworks ordinance. This is the second reading. A roll call vote is required.
All right. Before we get a motion on the floor, we can have some discussion if we want. Or someone can make a motion, then we can have discussion. Doesn't matter.
I was gonna say, we may wanna look at the way that violations is written, the way Chief brought it up. It's only mentioned in the last one about court costs. May want to reword that a little bit.
It says, for any one offense.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, maybe if we just move
So-
that plus court costs for any one offense down to the next line, so it's clear that
Yeah.
applies to all of them, and there's no ambiguity
Yeah,
there.
don't
that it
change, you don't need to
just
change the
applies
words.
Move
just
it down.
Move
Just
it
move it down
down.
to the next line,
Yep.
so it's clear that that's an overall.
Yeah, and I suppose it could be worded for any of the above offenses.
Mhm.
Because I can see where
Any
that
above
any-
misconstrued.
offense above.
For,
Don't want to be arguing that in court.
plus, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure,
Would it
I'm
work?
not sure that the word one is necessary. Perhaps it could be first court costs for any offense. And then set it off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that,
Yeah, that
I
sounds
think
better.
that would
Yeah, I think that would work.
remove any potential ambiguity.
Do we want to remove the word fire department into comm center, or do we want to address that point? I mean, the comm center does give out the fire department permits.
Which section is that in?
I talked to Sean about it, to ask him who should be issuing them, and he said the fire department, because he says the fire department issues the burning permits, and he wanted them to be issued the same day that the fireworks would be used, just like he does burning permits. And then he would know to staff his crew, so I was led to believe that they issue the burning permits same day that a burning permit's gonna be used, so. But that's what he said, because I went to see him first to find out who should be issuing those.
I mean,
And
we can
that's what-
take
that
fire
was his
department out,
suggestion.
So, take fire department out of it, so it's not locking us into that.
Chief, does the comm center still give out the burning permits?
They do, but, at the direction of the fire.
From the fire department, right.
And
Yeah.
I also spoke with the fire chief on this, and he didn't indicate to me that he didn't want the fire department to not be the issuing authority on this, because he wanted to tell me that when he's not available, the on-call officer would be the one that would do the inspection and issue the permit.
Okay.
So, I guess my initial thought here would be, in the interim, keep it with fire department, and see how this works out, and then over time, we can probably change that. I don't have that language in front of me as far as burning permits, but, I believe it says burning permits are probably fire department as well. Well, that may be.
Right from the website, though, this comm center, right on the website.
If we pull fire department off of it, that doesn't mean that if Diane says the fire department will do it, that's fine. But that just doesn't lock us into it as far as this goes.
Doesn't that give the comm center, it goes through the comm center anyways, but has to
True.
have the permission of the fire department before
True.
the comm center.
I mean, the actual permit, it's up to Diane, however, you know, whoever she wants to issue, leave it that way, and then, again, it doesn't lock us into, has to be the fire department. So if we change, we don't have to come back and change this.
So we could just change it to issuance of a permit? What would you suggest, son?
Perhaps you could replace fire department with, permits must be obtained from the office designated by the town manager.
That'll work. That would work.
Okay.
Which for now is the fire department.
I had one other thought on
Yes,
the
please.
court cost
Please.
language. I would propose that you add the words legal fees and court costs for any offense. Court costs are often viewed differently than legal fees, so I think the intent, as I heard the chief, would be to attempt to recoup the town's legal fees as well as any expenses for filing with the court.
Well, court costs also include officer overtime if they have to testify.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a trial that you have to deal with.
Yep,
You want those recouped as well.
for sure.
I have no objections.
Twyla, would we need to make a motion with all the amendments, or would we do a motion and reference our discussion? How would you like that done?
You would make a motion with the amendments,
Okay.
and They're not substantive changes, so
Okay.
they're fine.
I'd open the floor for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as amended.
I'll
with
second.
amendments.
And the amendments are that you replace the sentence, so it says legal fees and court costs for any offense, and that you replace fire department with permits must be obtained from the office designated by the town manager, correct?
Yes.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the, roll call vote.
Roll call.
Thank you.
Counselor Garrison?
Yes.
Counselor Pesky?
Yes.
Counselor Crafts?
Yes.
Counselor Mativier?
Yes.
Counselor Brunel?
Yes.
Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
And Counselor Bickford?
Yes.
We have 7 yeas, 0 nays. Order passed.
In the next item, please.
Order 2015-237, fee schedule, fireworks citation. This is the first reading. Roll call vote required.
With the fee schedule, should we also change that to the same language as any legal
Yes.
in-court fees?
I would suggest that.
I'd open the floor for a motion.
Make a motion with the amendment that we change it to match the language in the previous section.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
This would be a roll call vote since
For the
it's
first
an
reading?
ordinance.
For the first reading?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It is an ordinance. All right.
As an ordinance. So Counselor Bickford,
Yes.
Counselor Lunt,
Yes.
and Counselor Brunel,
Yes.
and Counselor McTevier,
Yes.
and Counselor Crafts,
Yes.
and Counselor Pesky,
Yes.
and Counselor Garrison.
Yes.
7 yeas, 0 nays. Order passed.
And the next item, please.
Move to order 2015-237, a camera for fuel pumps.
Ryan?
Good evening.
Good evening.
We discussed the security cameras for the Public Works and Transfer Station, I believe was the last meeting. We did get some updated pricing based on going with 4 cameras and 2 recording devices. The Seco Security bid was $9,242.92, with the Custom Technology Group bid of $7,542.55. And we recommend moving forward with the Custom Technology Group to get the systems installed. And splitting the cost based on the spreadsheet that I put in with the recommendation. We did speak with some members of the School Facilities Committee yesterday. One of the requests they had was that the camera that faces the gasoline pump would also provide enough field of view to pick up the buses as well, and I don't think that would be much of an issue to handle, so that would be one of the recommendations from an installation standpoint that we'd look to do, so.
Okay.
What was their cost per camera?
$695.
Just in case we
95 cents.
had to add another
Right.
camera to cover the buses.
Yep.
It's a good idea.
Well, and I notice in the wording, it's going to be recorded to 2 different devices. What is the reason behind that?
Primarily, there tends to be, on some occasions, a poor connection between the Public Works building and the transfer station building. And this will just allow also greater opportunity for storage of the feeds. It was basically just to make it easier from that standpoint. And it'll also be scalable in the future. If we want to add more cameras at Public Works or at the transfer station for whatever need, then we'll have that ability.
And these are going to be web-based, so I'm assuming the PD would be able to link in if need be at night?
Yeah, we've got the same systems at MTM Center and the sewer department, and I just haven't, I know Mark's, he's shown me on his phone that
Yeah.
he can see the feed. We haven't done that in the past. I don't see that as being a big deal, just figuring out how to set up the links and the permissions and then work with Harry and the PD to make that happen.
Good, yeah, I think it'd be important for them to have
Yep.
access to those if we're going to invest that money.
Yep, no problem.
Is there any limit to how many cameras that can be put on that? I mean, does the system have to be changed? You said something about adding some if we needed to. What will the system handle?
The system that we added at the MTM Center is still the original system, and I think we've added at least 1 or 2 more cameras since we initially installed it. They're pretty scalable. I mean, all it is a data cable that runs from basically a network hub, just like a regular computer or anything else, to the camera, and the camera has power and whatnot.
Any other comments or questions?
Just on your, I noticed that it says half the project will be assumed by solid waste department, and you have them down there for 5%.
Yeah, I did half plus 5%.
Okay,
5% of the half plus another half. All that.
okay. So the others
That's,
are.
they're only 5% of the fuel usage to
Okay.
begin with, so I basically split the cost of the project in half and multiplied that times all these percentages.
Okay.
And then for that particular one, I added what the other half was to it, so.
So all the
I
other
think I get the question.
percentages are a percentage of half of the project?
Correct.
Okay, that's why the numbers were looking weird to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other comments or questions? All right, I'd open the floor for a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept.
And is that with Custom Technology Group?
Yes.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Order passed 7-0.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep.
And the next item, please.
Order 2015-239, disposal of loader tires.
We, last year replaced the tires on the front end loader, and we hung on to some of them until we actually replaced the tires on the loader that we have at the transfer station as well. We need to dispose of them at this point, and we can either pay to get rid of them, or we actually had somebody offer to pay a couple $100 to buy them. So we're looking for that option to dispose of them that way versus paying to dispose of them. And because we're selling property, I have to get permission to sell property, so.
No, I think we should pay to get rid of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an offer at the time. We'll double check and see if there's any of the other tire dealers around that are interested, but our goal at this point is just to get rid of them without
Right.
paying.
The one right down, the one right on the corner,
It happened to be the one that was right on Capitol Ave,
so
yes,
you can roll them down there.
There you go.
pretty much.
Now, I noticed in your memo
Let 'em
here,
go and-
they're no longer any use to you because you use different tires, but
Right.
would they be any use in an emergency situation where, the tire goes
We
and
already
not
have
spare?
spares that
Okay.
actually that are decent spares for our own equipment. And these are, again, this is just surplus
Okay.
property, if you will.
Any other comments or questions? Open the floor for motion.
I'll make the motion to try to sell the tires.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
That's 7-0.
Correct.
No one opposed? Okay.
And the next item, please.
Order 2015-240, acceptance of Fairbanks Road.
Diane, do you want to start?
I'll start. In your packet, you should have had a letter from Ulver Associates. They came out and inspected the road. And, they said that the road appears to meet all the technical criteria defined in Chapter 3, Article 46 of the town ordinances. While they are unable to verify all of the design and construction standards for streets as defined in Chapter 66 for subdivisions, the major items such as road width and construction dimensions seem to be present. So the only exceptions are sidewalks, which doesn't seem to be necessary in this scenario, and the turnaround, which can be addressed by securing a larger way. I think that's your larger issue on this road. And the subdivision ordinance calls out a 65-foot diameter right-of-way for a new minor roadway, but the road acceptance ordinance, Article 46, does not mention this criteria. And then the second half of the assignment was to check with legal to see if you do decide to accept the road, what would that entail on the legal aspect of it and what that cost would be, and Dan can address that tonight for us.
There's a statute that specifically addresses a petition for dedication of a private road to a town way. And the statute provides that no property or interest therein can be dedicated for highway purposes unless the owner of the property or interest has filed with the municipal officers a petition or other writing specifically describing the property or interest and its location, and stating that the owner voluntarily offers to transfer such interests to the municipality without claim for damages. In this case, there appears to be a few different individuals who may have ownership or interest rights in the road. So I think before you would vote or consider acceptance of the way, you would want to require those who are interested in the town taking it to do a couple things. One would be to present a writing signed by everybody that has an interest. I think you'd want to require that they provide a certification from a surveyor as to all the properties and owners that have an interest. Because it's not only the individuals who own the land on which the road sits, but anybody on the road that has to access the road to get to the town way also would have an easement right. So in order to protect the town, you want to make sure that everybody signs off on it and is certifying that they're not going to make any claim for damages as the result of the action of the town accepting the way. And then I think you'd want to require that the owners or petitioners provide either a survey or a meets and bounds description of the road that could be used for purposes of drafting a deed conveying the property to the town. The question obviously is for you, those are the legal requirements. Is the town interested in taking on the liability of maintaining the road? And so that's ultimately your decision. So, you certainly can have that discussion tonight, or you could defer it until you actually receive all of this information that would be required in order for you to vote on whether to accept the road. As far as legal fees for that, if you were to receive all the necessary information and a proper petition, I don't think the legal fees would be significant. $500 to $1,000 is my guess. We'd put together a deed, make sure the description of the property is sufficient, and also prepare a certification for filing in the Registry of Deeds that you voted to accept the road.
Thank you very much for that detailed explanation. Does council want to have a discussion tonight if we are even interested in the road or not? Or do we want to wait to get everything and then have a discussion all at the same time?
I have no issues with taking the road. It's a very well-built road, and I know we've accepted stuff that's a lot worse.
See, can I ask a question?
Just pull your mic down a little bit.
Maybe Ryan can answer this. If we should take this road, do you have any idea how much kind of a cost that's gonna be for that upkeep, saying plowing and whatnot? Is that a significant amount, or?
There's already, the guy that's going down Route 9 will just pull in there and turn around and come back out. Just add a few minutes to his route once he gets started.
And that won't happen, right, Ryan?
The only concern that we have with the plow is just there is a location of some objects that we just need to be marked ahead of time. So I'm not sure if it was a transformer or electrical component or whatnot. Those are the only concerns we had, was just where you're gonna put the snow at the end of the.
Right.
the end of it. Which is fine, as long as the property owners are aware that we're a snowbank that we're gonna just push as far as we can out of the way, but we're just gonna take some coordination.
This road is a lot better than some of the ones that we plow. Driveways, what I call driveways that we plow.
Mark, do you have anything? I see your face
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
red.
I have a couple of questions. I know there's the rocks that were in the right-of-way area along the side of the road that haven't been moved out of the way. I believe there's an issue with that, to make sure that the right-of-way is cleared and there's no obstructions in the right-of-way. I think that should be done before we accept the road or even entertain the possibility of accepting it. And I also see in section 66-147, there's monuments that are required, which are permanent granite or cement monuments not less than 4 inches square in width, or iron reinforcement rods that would mark the right-of-way, and I don't believe those are currently in existence there to mark the right-of-way, so we would need to have those installed so that we would know, you know, as part of the surveying it, we need to know where the boundaries are, so there's no dispute.
Those are very good points. Greg, you have anything?
Mark just covered them.
My question is on a precedent standpoint, for Dan. By us you know, say the town was to accept this road, does it set a precedent, you know, for a legal case later on down the road if the council was not to accept, another road?
I don't believe so. I don't think that a property owner would have a good argument that simply because you've accepted other roads in town that you're bound to accept roads in the future. You can handle each one on a case-by-case basis, so I think the council has a lot of discretion on that.
Okay. Very good, thank you. You guys have anything over here?
I do. I have the same concern I had last time, is that it was basically Mr. and Mrs. Kelly's driveway for 11 years. And I'm not sure what happened after 11 years, but now he doesn't want to maintain it, he wants us to maintain it. Is that gonna send a word out to anybody that's got a big, long driveway that, now I don't wanna do my driveway, can I turn this into a town road? Because that's,
I could give you a lot of explanation, people that have that right now. I've tried to get them closed, and it's almost impossible.
again, do you wanna add more to the list? Again, I don't have anything against accepting any road, but is there housing development going in there? Are we getting a tax base, or are we just doing somebody's driveway? That was my biggest concern. I asked that of Mr. Kelly the last time you guys were here, you know?
It's definitely future for development down the road.
Right.
It's really technically not a driveway. His driveway is off of the road.
Yeah, I understand, but I've seen it, right?
Is there any house lots, other house lots on that road that are,
Not yet. We're looking at putting one house lot in there, creating the tax base. So there could be future other house lots down the road.
so extending the road, is what you're saying?
Depending on the road, yeah. We've had George Coburn and Survey Works look at it, draft up a complete construction plan on it for future development, so it's in, you know, it's possible.
Because you have plenty of acreage up there, don't you, too?
Yep. There's another 160 acres that goes with that road, so there's definitely room for more development.
So would you be willing to remove those rocks that are in the right-of-way before we accepted it? Because,
Well, you know, the rocks are kind of a funny thing, because they're kind of, they're a boundary line. So basically what we're saying here is that if there's a tree, you know, that's on the side of the right-of-way, those rocks are, you know, quite a ways away from the edges of it. That's probably more of a personal, you know, issue maybe with Mr. Cody that lives on that corner. I know you two are neighbors,
yes.
so,
No, I'm just looking out for the town's interest here. For any road, I would not want to accept a road where there's boulders in the right-of-way. That's not a rock wall, those are boulders.
yeah, but they're not in the right-of-way.
Well, then they're on Mr. Cody's property. I mean, you're going to be,
They're on the line.
well, they take up physical space. So they're on somebody's property. They'd be in what would be the town's property, or they're on Mr. Cody's property. See what I'm saying?
Concerned about somebody running into them?
I'm concerned about the issues of snowplow, and if we have to, you know, if there's that underground utility line that runs right under those rocks in that area, just for maintenance, if you had to dig that up, there's issues there. I don't want to have some, you know, a backhoe trying to dig that up in the middle of a winter and there's rocks in the way.
It seems a little unreasonable personally, okay? Because like I said, if we go around town and look at other roads, I'm sure there's rock walls, trees, a lot of obstacles, okay?
Those roads were accepted 100 years ago or more.
Possibly.
So I'm just gonna at this point break this and bring it back to the council. So we're at a point where we need to make a decision if we want to move forward with this or not, or what we'd like to do.
I have no problem with accepting the road if
Okay.
all the stipulations are met.
Yeah, I agree.
I did share the same, and I do share the same concern as Chris. You know, the question of how, you know, 11 years of it being maintained and plowed, and now coming over to the town. But I see, you know, as Ms. Fairbanks had stated, as possible development down the road in that property. So I can see both sides of this argument for sure.
And I would say, once there's development down the road, then we would be more interested in taking it as a road.
And at that point, would we take the new road with it, is that what you're saying?
Something along those lines. I mean, right now, there's only one person down at the end of the road. And as Roger stated, we've got a lot of those already that we're trying to get rid of.
It's not gonna happen, I can see.
I understand that.
I've been working 5 years on it.
Yeah. I remember those conversations.
Yeah.
So that's my only concern is we've been trying to get rid of similar roads and now we're gonna take one?
I have the same thing.
So I would say,
Well, on this one, I have no, it's such a well-built road that
I'm not arguing that.
I'm not, I don't have a problem. I just don't. You know, we gotta start somewhere, and if we want development in the town, we gotta start looking ahead.
So let's do this. Let's go around the council, because I think if we want to accept this, and these guys are gonna have to put some money into getting it surveyed and providing some documents, we should at least do this with an understanding that possibly there is a majority to do this. I mean, I'd hate to have these guys go do this work and come back and there not even be a majority tonight. So let's just start and go around the council and do like a straw poll. Who would be interested if cross the Ts and dot the Is? Do we want to do that? We got to give some sort of direction here.
Why not?
You're good if it crosses?
I have no problem with it, with accepting it. I think it can make it more appealing to future builders. And it is, like Mr. Bickford said, it's a well-built road, so personally, no problem.
Chris?
No.
Roger, you're yes. Eric?
I would say no unless we knew for sure there was future development, and that would be something to look at then.
Okay. Mark?
I would only accept it on the conditions that I've already said.
Okay. And Greg?
I would say no, not until I would send it back to the planning board and let them do their thing, and once there are more, shall we say, lots in the area and more development, then revisit it, but
Okay.
not this time. Don't see a reason to take on the extra liability. There's currently only one person on the road.
Okay. All right, so at this point, it appears that the council is split, and this could come to the point where you come back to us after November, after December. We don't know who will be sitting here. So did that straw poll for your sake to kind of gauge on what you want to do, if you want to go through the process that the attorneys outlined and submit those documents, and then come to the council for a formal request or not. I think that is the best way to leave this tonight. Anything else from council on this? Seeing nothing else, we'll move on to the next item, please.
Order 2015-241, the Bureau of Highway Safety Buckle Up, No Excuses Enforcement Grant Award Acceptance.
Chief Brooks?
This is to accept the grants that were approved to apply for. They've been received. There's two. You have two different numbers here. They're back to back. Just looking for the official procedural acceptance so we can move on.
Thank you. Open the floor for a motion.
I'll move to accept the $1,700 in federal highway safety funds.
Wasn't there a second number with that?
What the total was. Total award of 17.
How much is the total?
Don't know.
Oh, they're
According to
two.
Diane's notes,
They're
it
two
says-
separate.
Two different grants.
They're two different grants.
Oh,
Yep.
Two different grants? Oh, the one below it, high visiting enforcement grant for $37.50?
Right.
Well, so
Want
we'll
to do
do
both at once?
Ish. We'll visit both at once.
Can we do both at once?
That's fine.
Okay.
And I'll amend that to, what, $44.50?
We have a motion.
Second it.
Second. Thank you for applying for grants. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
And the next item, please.
Order 2015-243, the tax acquired property write-off.
This is one piece of tax acquired property. It used to be a mobile home, but now it's just a shell. And I'm not even sure if it's still there, but there's no point in going after something that's not there. And the current condition of it is just a shell with no value. And the outstanding taxes we deem at this point are uncollectible in the amount of $1,782.19. So I'm asking that you write that amount off for tax years 2011 through 2015.
Open the floor for a motion.
I'll make the motion to write it off.
Is there
Second.
Discussion?
Question. If the shell's still there, who's responsible for getting it off that property? Who owns the property?
The trailer park's gonna do it.
And are they gonna do it, do we know?
Yes.
Okay.
I appreciate all the work you and your staff have done to try to collect on these taxes. All those in favor of the motion?
Order passed, 7-0.
And the next item, please.
Order 2015-244, personal property tax write-off.
These are businesses that are no longer in business, and we've tried to locate them or locate an address for the prior owner, and we have had no luck at all. So we deem these as uncollectible as well. And there's a couple of them that we wouldn't be able to collect some of the years because it's past the statute of limitations. So at this point, it would be our recommendation to write off the personal property taxes to include principal and interest as of today's date in the amount of $15,311.98 for the taxes listed above.
Open the floor for a motion.
I got a question first.
Okay, yep.
Did you try, I know you tried, but did you try to get the police department to locate some of these people? Because I know one of them's still in business.
One of these businesses are in business?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Ryder.
DNR Construction? No? Do you know where he is?
I'm not sure. He floats around from place to place.
Oh.
But his mother lives right on the corner of Wing Street and Route 9.
It's not a lot of money there either.
No, it's not a lot of money, but you know.
No,
it's
but
just-
we have to be able to know, to get him and to locate him so that we can take him to small claims court, and that's what we're not able to do. I mean, I don't,
I see him Saturday mornings and stuff up to the transfer station.
well, do you want, we can take that one off the list if you'd
Well,
like.
It's not a lot of money, but whatever the council wants to do.
I was wondering what's the difference between the in this spreadsheet we have of 15,818.06 and the 15,311.98 in the recommendation.
Oh, you know what, we updated the list and I didn't update my, it was, which one was it? I think it was the neighborhood redemption.
Okay. So the correct number is the $15,818.06.
Yes.
Dylan, is that 15-818-06?
Correct.
1881806.
Any other comments or questions on this?
No, basically, if it's gonna cost more to chase him down than it's gonna be to do it, then no, you know.
Okay. I think the staff has they've put a lot of work into doing these letters and stuff to hunt these people down, so I think it's time we move on. My last question I have is, typically, I know, you're doing a lot of things now that wasn't done in the previous administration, so really nothing is a surprise anymore to any of us. But typically, is it this far back, with the years of 2011, when you would start to, when you
No.
would bring this to us?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So
This is done on an annual basis.
so this is cleaning house still?
This is clean, yeah.
Okay.
And, we're working on it. We have several taxpayers that have payment plans.
Okay.
But these are just the ones that we can't locate.
Okay.
And I wanted to get them off the books before the end of August so that our tax liability for these is gone. It will help our fund balance.
Okay.
But the ones that will not respond to us that are currently in business and that do not have payment plans, our next step is the small claims court, but there aren't that many out there. Everybody's been pretty good and they've got payment plans going.
I'd open the floor for a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept.
As a write-off?
Yep.
Is there a second? Discussion? All set, Greg?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion?
Order passed, 7-0.
And the next item, please.
Order 2015-245, the school payroll and accounts payable policy amendment.
I have two things with this. The last time I brought an amendment to you, the amendment was correct, but I grabbed the wrong policy. I grabbed the one that we had initially before we met with the superintendent and the business manager. I grabbed the wrong policy, so we amended the wrong one. We amended the right section, but wrong policy. But subsequent to that, we've added one more thing to it, so it was gonna come back to you anyway. And, get my hands on it here to tell you what that amendment was.
Isn't it the upon completion? Is that the sentence, the
This-
paragraph it's in?
It's towards the end, I think it was.
Do you have a page number?
Yeah, what page are you
It's
on?
It's only one-
page number 3.
It's only one page, really.
Yes, yeah, yeah, if the such circumstances should arise, either the town manager or finance director will be able to sign checks requiring a manual signature for an approved warrant in these extraordinary circumstances. So that allows us to, sign them.
All right. I'd open the floor for a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
And the next item, please.
Order 2015-246, main PERS IUUAL funds.
Yeah, we received, a check from Maine PERS in the amount of $15,971.07, and that represents an amount that we overpaid back before we became part of the consolidation plan. We had to pay a really high percentage into the Maine state retirement system, and they've been holding that on file for years and years, and now it's come to their attention that they should be giving those funds back to the municipalities. But the municipalities that have had a credit on hand, they've been using a portion of it every year and every month to offset their liability. So what they're doing now is they're reimbursing all the municipalities that have balances, and we did get a check for that amount. And what we've done right now is we've receipted into restricted undesignated fund balance, because we don't want you to designate it at this time. We're waiting to see where we come in with our health insurance claims. I can tell you that we're over budgeted right now. We did not have enough in the budget to end up paying out the rest of the claims at year end for health insurance. I don't know where we're gonna end up, but we may need that money to go towards that. And this is totally the employer's share of the retirement. This is not employees' share at all. So right now, if you could just, accept the funds and allow us to deposit into restricted fund balance. And then we'll be back to you later on to redesignate it once we know we're not gonna have any more run-out claims on the self-insured health plan.
And from our conversation a couple days ago, you're expecting these claims to stop coming in within a couple of months because we've switched over to the new health insurance.
Yeah.
All right. I'd open the floor for a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept the funds.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Order passed, 7-0.
And the next item, please.
Order 2015-247, Brownfield Phase 1.
Tracy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Last month, we had a workshop in reference to the Atlantic Salmon Federation and the Mill Street mill. I was asked, or charged, I guess, to take a ride up to Augusta and look through files, which I did, and they certainly have quite the vault. I also met with Nick Hodgins, who is with DEP, more like EPA with brownfields. And in meeting with him, one of the suggestions he had was to go through the process of doing a brownfields for the Mill Street site, and that would allow us to do a phase one. And he would be able to, by applying for that, we would be able to have a report by October, by the time he goes out for bid and gets a consultant on board. Then with AvCog, because they have $200,000 of brownfields monies to do phase ones and phase twos, and they will be able to do some things here for Elizabeth. If there was warranted for a phase two, we would be able to go through the AvCog and have the phase two done, so which would expedite having some new environmental studies done. From what I found back in 2004 was about the last time that there was borings and testing done, and that was when the buildings were still on the property. So what I would want to do, or what I would recommend, is that this is an opportunity for us to go through that process. Is no cost to the town, and go through the brownfields. And once we're locked into the brownfields program, if there was any type of contaminants, if the town chooses to take that property, I would be able to apply for cleanup money, and again, at no expense to the town, and then we'd be able to take and redevelop that property. So that's my suggestion.
I think it's important, briefly to give a little background, because when we had the workshop, not all the councilors were able to make it. I don't think Council Garrison was there, and I don't think these two were there either. So what we sat with DEP, Atlantic Salmon Federation, and who was the other guy?
They were both for DEP.
Oh, DEP, okay. And the water commissioners were also there.
Yes.
And what prompted this discussion was down on Mill Street, when you get to the dam on Mill Street, just before the community school from 196, there is a water main in there, in the river. And the Atlantic Salmon Federation wants to clean up that dam and remove that dam there. But in order for that to be done, they need to link changing the water main at the same time. And there's a concern that the water level would go down to a point where that water main would then be possibly exposed, and that would be then open to being taken out by a log or something coming down the stream. So the total project for the water main and their dam removal, according to my notes, is anywhere between $575,000 to $600,000. The mercury cleanup they have estimated as $150,000. The water main changeover would be approximately $200,000, and the dam removal would be approximately $200,000. The Atlantic Salmon Federation, and we have a gentleman from Atlantic Salmon Federation here tonight, and feel free to pipe in at any point. They have secured some funds that will run out if we don't have a plan to move forward. But Lisbon is a prime spot to get started with their project. So between their funds and the water department, the water department has $50,000 set aside to work on the main. The question is, and this is where the brownfields portion came in, is the town willing to, is the council willing to commit $50,000 to put towards this water main to get the project done? So I asked the question of, well, I have a hard time with voting to commit taxpayer money to fix a water line that is funded for a water department that is funded through users. But the selling point is there's a potential there that land could be given to the town. So my big concern, and I believe the rest of us that was there, we had the concern, is we don't want to enter into something where there's a possibility that land could be it wouldn't be valuable land. So that's where Tracy went up to DEP and went through the records. So I think one of the main questions that I think the council needs to answer before we even go into the brownfields is, we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of how we want to get to it, but I think the council needs to answer if contingent upon the brownfields going through and contingent upon Mrs. Miller agreeing to give the property to the town for a clean site, is the town willing to put in $50,000 to the project? Because personally, I don't think we should waste DEP's time and our staff's time with trying to fill out, in the Atlantic Salmon Federation, trying to fill out this paperwork for brownfields if the council can sit here tonight and say we don't want to commit $50,000. So personally, from the discussion that we've had so far, I think that's the first question that we need to answer. I had a brief communication. I believe he was the vice president of the Atlantic Salmon Federation. Oh, it wasn't you, was it?
Yes. Well, there's, John Burrows is our point person.
Yes.
But so, and a lot of the communication, just because I live locally and has been with me. So we're both up to speed on it.
Yeah, because I knew you were originally on the email, and then we kicked back and forth a couple times. But what I asked through the email was, because this project wouldn't get done, they wouldn't start the project till next year. So I asked, would we already need to have the funds set aside, the $50,000, or could we enter into an agreement of some sort and budget it in next year's budget for that $50,000? And he said as long as it was there was an agreement and we were going to put $50,000 in, they wouldn't lose their funds. So I think the first question the council needs to answer: are we willing to commit $50,000 one way or another? And then if that's the case, I think then we need to apply for talk about the brownfields.
And if I could just add a little bit here. So the Atlantic Salmon Federation, we've been working at that site for probably 3.5 years now, trying to just sort of bring certainty and facilitate a solution. Because right now, the dam was originally breached with the sluice gates, just a storm washing those out. Several years later, Miller Industries, as part of the mercury cleanup, breached that dam even further. So it's sort of a hazard, an ugly hazard, sort of sitting there now. They had hoped to have the mercury cleaned up several years back, but they weren't aware that the water main was there. And so when they did the mercury cleanup, they could only get about 80% of it, and the mercury that it remains around that water main on the bottom. So the role that we've played over the last couple of years is doing the engineering studies on the dam, the water main, the mercury, and sort of going out to bid, trying to get hard numbers, and then talking with the different groups. I've met with the water districts, on a regular basis over the past 3 years. And so, I am happy to report that Miller Industries and their lawyer, I spoke with their representative today, and he said, informally, that Mrs. Miller has agreed to financially contribute to the mercury cleanup. And our role here is to not only facilitate a solution, but bring resources to implement that. So, but it's the first time that Miller has said, they'd be willing to kick in funding to help if ASF can kick in funding as well. So that, I think, is a positive. As I said, the water district, that water main, the water district has a lot of priorities. The water main, is probably 80 years old, that section. So they would like to see it replaced, but they have other priorities as well. So they have budgeted some money. The water main is vulnerable right now. It's more vulnerable because the dam is breached. If you were to go there tomorrow, you'd clearly see that water main just under a little bit of water there. So basically what the solution does is that, all at once in 2016, we'd go in and somehow sequence it, but we'd remove the mercury through Clean Harbors, we'd bury the water main, which would make it good for another 100 years, and we'd take that dam out. So all of a sudden we get an attractive site, a usable site, something that we think that would become an asset as opposed to a liability. So that may have been a long-winded solution. So even without the land, even without the town, deciding now on the land, I think there's still some benefit to get the mercury out and the water main buried and the dam out to be just a more usable place in general. With that, I'll take any questions.
I got a question.
Yep.
Actually, a couple. Chris would know if that water main's in any danger, or he should have a pretty good idea.
Not yet, but it is. It's close.
Okay.
When it was breached last time, they talked about it. Because
Alright.
there's only so much coverage on it, and I'd like to have a little more.
Okay, so there is something there.
Absolutely.
The other question is, if we invest $50,000, that's max, right? We're not investing anything else in it, and the finished product will be a nice-looking piece of property that'll be turned over to Lisbon and to Tracy, and what kind of benefits the town, what can we use this property for?
Well, when you look at the 50,000, it would basically be going towards the water main. So as far as the mercury, that will be done by Mrs.
they're
Miller.
taking care of that,
Yes,
right.
that will all be done through that. I just want to kind of
Right.
clear that on that. As far as the redevelopment of that, when I've looked at that property, it definitely abuts the trail. So we could use, it could be used, utilized as far as for recreational purposes. And also, and we had discussed this earlier, within the water is due kind of like a landing, if you will, for kayaks and canoes, because that's all pretty much you're going to get in there. And again, it's going to be seasonal. And I had this conversation with DEP as well. When you breach the dam, the water level is going to go down. However, there are going to be peaks at the seasons or whatever that it will rise, and so it'll be more of a seasonal type of activity to be able to utilize it. It's also close proximity to the school as well. You know, if the town decided that they wanted to sell part of it off or whatever for development, I mean, you'd be able to do that. The biggest thing with the brownfields is coming away with a piece of paper that says this is a site that DEP has no issues with, and it makes this property more valuable. Right now, the property has no value to it because nobody knows what's in the ground. And so the idea of it is let's find out what's there. And this is a way of doing it. And the process of it, even if we don't take it over, at least we'll know, you know, what's there. In the fall, I plan on coming back to council because there are a lot of sites within the community, and in speaking with DEP, they recommended for us to go after our own brownfields grant. So I do plan to do that this fall. So then we're able to kind of go through these sites and really take a hard look at some of them.
Diane?
I just wanted to say Mrs. Miller's attorney contacted me today as well and said the same thing, that she's willing to commit up to a certain amount for the mercury removal. He did reach out and touch base with me.
Very good.
And what is that number?
45,000.
What's the cleanup gonna cost?
Well, the Clean Harbors estimate is 145,000. But that's not a complete straight answer because of the fact that, with all these, whether it's the dam removal, the water main or the mercury, it all has to be done in the dry. And so there's some economies of scale by trying to do all this together because, if they had to go in and clean up that mercury themselves, they would have to do a lot of coffer damming with a water dam as they did before. And that becomes the most costly part of the project. But we have agreed to pick up all that part of the cost. And we've agreed to, handle the permitting and sort of the general contracting and playing that role. So, we would continue to facilitate and implement the solution. We'd have an agreement, a legal agreement with Miller Industries, and they're actually currently drafting that. And then we'd develop a legal agreement with the town or the water district or whoever the appropriate party would be, to do the water main.
How would council like to move forward?
I'm in favor.
I don't like having to spend the 50,000, but I think it's a reasonable investment in cleaning up that river, and I think there'd be a benefit to the town if we get that river back to the way it used to be.
Anything over here?
That river's pretty shallow now.
Yeah.
I
I had this,
it's in my backyard.
Yeah.
And, it's gone down quite a bit with just what they've done. So if they take that out, it's not gonna be a little river anymore, it's gonna be like a stream. So I'm not sure not sure that your fish are gonna make it all the way up there with what pike are left in that little stream.
Yeah.
Cause them
Right.
pike are gonna eat up
Yeah.
anything you
So
send up that stream.
No, that's right. Well, the river, what's the sort of the major producer of river herring in the Androscoggin is the Sabattis, and it's mostly because of Maine DMR stock Sabattis Pond. They capture fish at the Brunswick Dam. They truck them up into 6 ponds in that whole drainage, and so that's sort of the value of that tributary there. But they're sort of the foundation of the food chain, and they produce literally billions of young, and everything eats them, pike eat them and everything else. But yeah, and this would be a seasonal migration, so these fish go up in the spring when the water would be higher. That's when you'd have some canoeing or kayaking. You know, they don't drop down out, the juveniles, until the fall, with the rains in the fall. But certainly in the summertime, you'd have, certainly some low flows in that area. It would be basically back to a stream environment as opposed to a stream river environment, as opposed to sort of halfway in between at the moment, between a lake and a river.
I had that same concern, Chris, and I mentioned that during the workshop, and I'm still struggling with it, because that is a very, and I've mentioned it to you a couple times now, it is a very, the river went from being good size to almost a little trough in some points, and it will continue, it will go down farther, and you explained, how it might smell for a little bit like it did before, and then the stuff will grow so it won't smell. But on the flip side, my concern, and maybe I got to put that concern away, because if they lose their funding and that dam goes, there are some massive liabilities there for the town and for Mrs. Miller that we could then be dealing with not going to have funding. So we have both of those problems right now.
Yeah, no,
I'm
it is.
juggling.
Yeah, and it's a choice for the town. I mean, the water main, we are agreeing to pay half of that, and there's, which is a six-figure price that will be coming up and paying for that, for the town.
Should something happen to that down the road, we're gonna have to foot the whole bill on that water main.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cases all around Maine. Well, look at the dam, the upper dam, the town of Lisbon owned, that breached several years ago, and we see that sort of all over the state. The towns that choose to spend money on dams are ones that are sort of at lake outlets, where you've got property owners with a vested interest in their lake levels or their property values, or hydro dams that are generating revenue, and those revenues can pay for fish passage or dam improvements. These old mill dams, inevitably, I don't know of a case really around Maine where a town's chosen to put money into rebuilding it just because it's so expensive, and then there's that upkeep, and if there's but one thing I would say is, if we get to the agreement stage, which I think we're getting closer to here, then there would be a permitting process, and that would include a public process, and so there would be a series of public meetings, and certainly all the landowners along the impoundment would be notified, and there'd be meetings and input taken back and forth at that time as well.
Not at this time, Larry. Anything else from council on this?
I'm willing to, go forward either now or a lot of money later down the road.
You don't know that.
How would council like to move forward? By split.
Well, what do we need?
We need a vote to move forward in one fashion or another. If the council wants to say we're willing to commit $50,000, then we're gonna have to deal with, meet with legal counsel to have them draft up like an agreement and along with all parties. Or we can put this off and we can discuss with legal counsel liability issues if we want to do that. Or we can say we don't want to do anything at all. Those are our three options at this point. Unless I'm missing something.
No, but we'd still want to do the Brownsfield, right, no matter what. So that's what
That's
you're
the
really,
major
that's
thing.
what you're
Yeah,
gonna,
yeah.
But
right now.
no,
but-
not for me. Not for me. I'm not. I mean, I'm one vote, but I'm not willing to put the town through a process for that piece of property for brownfields if we're not going to commit money to work on the site because these guys are going to pull out. So to me, these three pieces all link together to one project.
So Tracy, on the brownfields, we can apply, but there's no funds available unless it turns over to us, the property, as far as cleanup, right? How's that work?
That is correct. We can go through the
So it is
Brownfields
connected to
program.
what Dylan said.
Yes, absolutely, and I wouldn't do it other way. I mean, the biggest thing is that within the time frame. I mean, my conversation with Nick was that basically bring this to council today, he wants the application tomorrow. And the reason why is because he's got to go out and get a consultant and then start the paperwork. The phase one is just going through all the data. It's collecting and going through the same files that I went through. And then the phase two, if they decide from that they do need a phase two, then they will do the boring and go through the property and actually do the actual testing. And phase two would be done through AvCog, which wouldn't take place until a little bit later anyways. But as far as on that, based on that phase one and phase two, then that's the opportunity that if there does show anything there, and if the town feels that it is a piece of property that could be of use for us, then once of ownership, then we would be able to go after, if there's any type of cleanup, then we would be able to go after those cleanup funds. But unless we don't have the property, when it comes to brownfields, no private owner can go after
Correct.
funding. Only the municipality can.
Yep.
Because that's the idea behind it, is for them to be able to redevelop it and make use out of a bad site, if you will.
So is there any disadvantage at this point for doing just phase one? Because phase two, you've got to get permission from the property owner to
Correct.
go on the property to do those test borings, right?
That's correct. No, there's no disadvantage as far as on that, it's just starting the process. And again, you know, I can sit here, I have the overlay as far as DEP on the spills and sites here in Lisbon that is on my Google, and I'll tell you, there's gonna be a lot of properties. So, you know, us going forward and doing this is we're actually doing our own due diligence to know what exactly is in this community and what needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah, I have a question. Now, the mercury that's under that water main, is that contained or is it leaking?
No, we just, so there was engineering studies a number of years ago. We just went and updated those this past winter. They took borings through the ice in March. And so we have identified where that area, it has migrated a bit, but it's pretty heavy and it gets, there's a lot of rubble there. It's not the most natural bottom, and a lot of it's pretty down into these spaces.
But it's not just gonna stay there forever. If we don't do anything, it could spread to other parts downriver from there,
Right.
correct?
Right. Yeah, probably some has.
From the Atlantic Cement Federation standpoint, you guys are pretty pressed here to get a commitment from the town on one way or the other, correct?
Yes, and it's mostly has to do with the fact that we started this, 3.5 years ago, and then we thought we were going to be able to put something together, a year or so ago. And so the grants, these are both state, federal, and some private grants that we have, and we have roughly a little over 300,000 now. We've already spent 90,000, which isn't even in the total in all the engineering studies. And so we've been able to extend those grants to next year, but we would need to construct the project next year, and to do that, because of the permitting lag and everything else, we would need to have an agreement in place, late this summer, this fall, sort of this time period, and that's why Miller is in the process of going forward and saying, yes, we'll participate in drafting an agreement, and that's what we would like, and because after next year, I think it would be difficult for us to stay in.
Yep. Greg, you had something.
Well, as has been stated, Miller's working on their piece. I think it would be a little premature for us to say, okay, well, we're gonna give money, but what we have before us is just applying for the brownfield money, the study. To me, I would say go ahead with that. There's no cost. We may find out that there's a lot more problems with that property than we even wanna touch.
Good.
We may find out there's nothing, in which case that's something we can deal with later. I have no problem with putting money into this. I don't think that's something we need to worry about today, right this minute. So I would move forward with what we have in front of us and allow them to, I would move to authorize the town manager to go ahead and apply for the brownfield. And we'll go with the rest of it from there. We'll see what.
I just had a timing question.
Yep.
And that's to Tracy. So the brownfields work, when would the phase one be complete?
He said probably he could get a report back by the 1st of October.
Okay.
That was why the urgency of getting it in now. He'd get me a report back by 1st of October.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think, you could look at it even separate from the land and still think it's a good deal for the town to come up with the 50. I guess that's the way I would hope you might look at it. But I think, if it had to be October, we could probably wait till then. But, I mean, we are, you know, and it's not it's not a threat at all, but we'd have to wrap it up this fall one way or the other.
I mean, my only thing is that's not actually what's on the agenda to discuss that piece of it.
No, they're
so-
just connected.
They are, but
They are
Yeah.
connected.
I won't argue that, and again, I don't have a problem with putting money into it. But for me, let's start with the brownfield, see if we get, if they say,
I've
hey,
no-
sorry, we don't have any funds to do that, then it's a swing and a miss, and we're back to square one, and
It's, as far as the brownfields, there is funding to do that. So that was why I have to hurry up and get it into them.
yeah, but are they gonna?
So they can
yeah.
process
I've heard
it.
the state say there's funding available, and
So,
then,
In my conversation with Nick, he's ready to move forward to get us a phase one.
I believe it when I see it. But I think
I'm
you
gonna
should
hold
apply
him to
for
it,
it.
put it that way.
Yep.
Mark, what are you thinking?
Well, we could take a straw poll just to see who would be supportive of the idea of the 50,000 if everything else works out, and, you know, we're not necessarily binding vote tonight on it, just
Yeah.
to see, are we willing to spend that if things come out
That's
right?
really all that I think
I-
that I would want to see done.
I'm willing.
Because I don't, like I said before, I don't see the benefit of doing this if we can sit here tonight and say, no, we're not even gonna put 50 in even if it comes back right, if it comes back good.
Mhm.
That's my only stump
Again.
with this whole thing.
I mean, yeah, I agree.
Just
As
see where
far
we
as,
stand.
yeah, and as far as that goes, it's gonna be, yeah, we'll put the 50 in as long as Miller's willing to put theirs in and give us. the
So
land.
we would need to start with legal counsel right away to get
I
something
concur.
rolling here for an agreement, if we decide to do so.
Let's give a straw poll.
All right. What do you think, Greg?
I'm for it.
Okay. Mark,
I'm for it if everything else works out.
Yep.
You know, we negotiated a good deal.
Eric?
The same way, if we end up with some property in it, we can sell it and we could possibly make something down the road on it, so I'm okay with it.
Roger?
Yep.
Dale? Chris? And I'm there too, so looks like we have a good straw poll to move forward with a funding mechanism if everything goes well. Of course, it's a straw poll. Now I think we'll have to start with legal counsel to get something drafted and work with the Millers and all the parties involved. So we'll start that, and now we'll bring us to our item, and does someone want to offer a motion to move forward?
I thought that motion was made by Counselor Garrison.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
did make
I
it
did
already.
make a
That's
motion,
right.
so I'll second Counselor Garrison's motion.
Okay. You want to repeat your motion?
To authorize the town manager to apply for the municipal brownfields assessment under the Maine DEP.
Good. Motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Thanks for dealing with us through this process. And the next item, please.
Order 2015-248, FAME grant contract.
Again, you have before you the changes. Basically, FAME did an amendment to their process. I gave you a copy of all that with the changes, and we just have to update our contract on our end to go along with the state's new changes within their rules. Just asking permission for the town manager to sign that agreement.
Any questions or comments? I'd open the floor for motion.
I'll make the motion to accept.
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Thank you, Tracy. In the next item, please.
2015-249, medical marijuana ordinance discussion.
I'm gonna let Amanda and Tracy take this one. Seems you did all the work on it.
I don't really, you guys all have the memo. I don't really have a presentation. It's just, that's the summary of what I know, which is more than I knew before, but still I don't have a lot of answers. There's a lot of gray areas to the whole medical marijuana ordinance thing. The concise part, or the short story from, you would have seen in the memo. Dispensaries, we have a lot more leeway to sort of have some regulations, have an ordinance. Many towns already have an ordinance for dispensaries. There are only 8 allowed in the state, so that pretty much puts the limits on, are they all 8 are spoken for right now?
Yes,
Yeah,
they're all
so-
spoken for now. However, in looking at it, is that I'm sure there's probably a waiting list. So if you decide, well, there's 8 out there, everybody's, so it's not gonna come up. possibility could come up down the road, that if somebody decides that they're on a waiting list to open one here, that, you know, if we don't have anything in place, a mechanism in place on what we want to see.
So the dispensary is really sort of the retail or medical office type use, whereas the caregiver use is the other element that I brought into the memo. And that's just anybody who's registered as a caregiver and has patients and has the allowed number of plants. That's where it's really a lot of gray area. Some towns are kind of going for it and trying to make some regulations as to where those are allowed. There are issues of multiple caregivers running their own, having their own individual operations, but all under the same roof. I think it's best if you just, ask me the questions if you have some, or if you have any questions about the recommendations. I think we have enough to go forward to put together something in land use ordinance to try to do what we can to regulate this. I am really viewing this as it's another business. There are certain issues that it's going to raise. One of them is, when we have the ability to control how this use affects neighbors or neighborhoods. There's a little bit in there that we'll be able to control, but in school zones, we may be able to also do buffers around school zones, playgrounds, kind of areas where there are kids, the libraries.
Well, library, yeah.
Libraries I didn't specifically list that there, but yes, it would, something, any areas like that.
Well, there's a library right down the street from where they're talking about.
Right.
We added that to the memo.
That's in the memo.
That's part of the recommendation now. It's been added in.
Yeah, I think that it's probably reasonable to think about this even a little bit of bigger picture if we're going to be setting some sort of setback buffer for dispensaries, or to the extent that we can have setbacks for, actually I know Herman put on restrictions, increased setbacks for outdoor growing, any caregivers that do their growing outside of their home or the building that they're operating in. But having setbacks around schools and playgrounds and other areas where there are kids seems to be something that a lot of communities are kind of gravitating towards. I think that's going to probably hold up, but all of this is, every town seems to have their own lawyer's opinion on how this will go, and we'll have to go through the same process. We'll go through what people would like to see, and then we'll give the best answer we can as to whether or not it's legal and run it through the ringer.
Council have any comments or questions? Chief Brooks?
I just had the opportunity to read this memorandum today, and it talks about safe zones, and the town currently has a safe zone ordinance, and it's 46.3 in your book, and it was established in 2006, and it was established because the state gave the authority to the towns to designate areas for safe zones for illegal drug cultivation. And I don't know if there's a copy of the ordinance book up there or not, but when you get the opportunity to look at section 46.3, and it'll list Summer Street Park, Smith McCarthy Park, Beaver Park, Miller Park, Pine Woods Road ball fields, the Lisbon Trail System, MTM Center, and it goes on and on and on, and including the library, the park behind the library, not the library itself. So I see this report and recommendation speaks on that. We have it. Safe zones for illegal drug activity. My recommendation in your process is that you maintain the integrity of the safe zones that we've already established for basically legal drug activity as well. And that's the 1,000-foot rule. And beyond safe zones, there is statutory language that does protect the schools as well. So just mirror that language and for both the illegal side of it that we work on and the legal side of it that someday you may be working on. But I would do whatever you do and protect the integrity of the safe zones that we already have.
Thank you very much. Good points there. Anything else from council we have here?
I think we gotta send it out to the voters, let them decide if they want it or not.
We can't, can we?
Right, it says you cannot ban it entirely, you can control where they can be, like by zone.
Okay,
You
so-
can't- you can't say nothing at all. This-
How about city limits? Town limit, you know.
What do you mean?
It'd be like, you can't have it inside the town, on the outskirts of town.
I think it would be more appropriate in the commercial zones than in residential areas. You don't want
Well,
people driving by
just
and
my
going to
opinion.
somebody's house.
Just my opinion.
It will have to go through, I mean, if it's gonna, if there's any ordinance work, the planning board's gonna have to have public hearings, advertised and open to the public. You guys are gonna have to read it many times, probably. I think there will be a lot of public process, good chance it'll get some press, so I don't think it will go unnoticed. I don't know what your options are in terms of literally sending any ordinances to the voters to approve. I don't know that that would be necessary if we're going through all of this extensive public process, but, you guys can. Yeah.
So there is a limitation as well. I mean, so Lewiston, they limited theirs to one.
On dispensaries, but yeah, where most communities are struggling is not the dispensaries,
It's the
it's
growing.
the individual caregivers that are doing their 6 plants per 5 patients per.
From a legal perspective, do we have anything, any insight on anything you want to add before?
I mean, I think Amanda's summarized it well, that this is a gray area, and different communities have taken different levels of risk on how strict they want to be. And so I think depending on where the council would prefer to go, you can make a call as to whether you want to risk a potential challenge. But there really hasn't been meaningful court decisions yet interpreting what the scope of a municipality's ability is to restrict caregivers.
Well, this is just a discussion, so we don't have to have a vote tonight, but my personal opinion is that I won't vote in favor of ordinance that comes before us if I'm sitting here when it does, because of the gray area that has been outlined. I think we need more time for courts to make rulings and give us some hard facts. I think it really looks bad when communities don't have black and white ordinances and they're open for interpretation. So that's my personal opinion, and take that with you and whatever the planning board decides to do.
If I may, I respect that statement, I think it's reasonable. I would also say, though, that whatever we put forward would be based on pretty sound professional land use law, certainly the legal advice. I think we'd be uncomfortable putting forward anything terribly gray and too fuzzy, but it would be good to hear from the community, from members, what
That would be.
what would they like to see us work on it, just, from a land use perspective. I don't have any sense, we could have a meeting or a couple meetings and people would say, it's all good, or maybe everyone will say, no, as many restrictions as you can. I have no idea where the range is at all, so we really do need some community input on this one,
Sounds like you know what you're doing.
so they say.
All right.
I just need some clarification on next steps and process. I know we have the moratorium ends before we can get through this process. And my next step would be to take this to planning board to set up a public process and kind of get the planning board up to speed as the entity that deals with ordinances. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
I know, are we all set with extending the moratorium, or is that a?
When does it run out?
It is,
It was for 90 days, so.
we did May, June, it's coming right up.
It's coming right, so we may have to just come back to the council and put in an extension.
I will throw out, just to make things more complicated, the moratorium is for dispensaries. Since there isn't likely to be a dispensary proposal anytime in the near future, you may not need to do anything about the moratorium. The moratorium is
That's what I
not
s-
covering a lot of this other caregiver stuff, and, until the state says there's gonna be any more dispensaries allowed, we're really,
Have something in place by then.
so I'll throw that out as, I'm not, I can revisit with Diane too, just to make sure, but it may not be necessary to do anything more on moratoria.
Okay.
Just curious, the local businesses that would be surrounding that, have you heard any feedback from them or what their thoughts are on having something like this move in right next to them?
On
The
which
dispensary-
business?
Any of the business that are in that area?
Oh,
Talking about Main Street.
I'm not dealing with this on any, I'm looking at this as the, the wholesale. We don't have any actual cases or any issues before the planning board, so I have nothing to really go on at this point.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Order 2015-250, Time Warner franchise fee.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this back to you before we finalize the Time Warner franchise contract, to see whether you wanted to charge a fee, and I gave you the different percentages that you could possibly charge and what the revenue would look like in 12 months. So I think what we want to find out tonight is whether you want to charge a franchise fee moving forward when the contract starts, or if not, then we would like to include language in the new cable TV franchise agreement that allows us to charge it in the future. And I know we've, gone through this budget where we've done a lot of reductions, and this is a way to look for some additional revenue. So I wanted to bring it to the table to see what you wanted to do. If you don't, that's fine, but I think we need to determine whether we put some language in there that allows us to do it in the future, should we decide to.
Thoughts from council?
The relatively few people who have mentioned it to me have been against it. So I would say we haven't done it in how many years? Why start now?
I've heard the same thing.
But I would agree, leave it in the contract to say, hey, if it comes forward, don't eliminate it from it. I mean,
No.
it's-
Okay.
we don't want to tie our hands if we don't have to.
Yeah, I'd say I'd only support it if we're actually gonna use the money for upgrades that would benefit the subscribers to the cable TV by giving them more community access, local stuff to, if you could watch games from the, high school, that kind of thing, or, have our meetings on a night when people are actually at home, something like that, and benefit better equipment, so we had better, viewing experience. I think those sort of improvements would be worth it. It would be, you're spending something that benefits the customer, not just, let's cover our budget with the cable TV subscribers' money.
I agree with that.
I mean, I think 3%, you could do $50,000. That would allow you to do big upgrades to our AV equipment here and make these meetings more transparent for people. And, you wouldn't be doing a huge burden on the people.
Anything else here?
I'd go along with probably no more than 3%.
So is the consensus we want to do a 3%, or is it consensus
If
we don't want to?
if we can do like Mark said, the customers will benefit from it.
You can help me out with this, Twyla. We met with Time Warner, and there really isn't any need to upgrade the equipment. They looked at our equipment and they said, we have the top-notch equipment. What the issue is gonna be is if we wanna start recording this and have it on, have like a dedicated channel, they're gonna want us to have a dedicated person running the camera. And so that would be hiring additional personnel to do it. And then you've gotta have that person that's gonna be right there to continually change the tape so that there's something going on that channel all the time. And he indicated it would be more than one person, because it's quite a job, it's quite a big change, it's quite a big job to do that. And it's nothing that we could ever do, we would have to hire somebody, so the money would probably more likely be used for that, for personnel, to make sure that somebody is changing that tape or doing what they need to do so that there's something on that channel. Otherwise than that, they will not dedicate a channel to us.
I think it'd be worth looking into what it would cost to do a channel and seeing if it's, achievable within the budgets here. Just contact them and, talk prices a little bit, or Great Falls TV, and see, negotiate with them what it would cost to do another channel.
Yeah, we can do that.
Another question would be, do we have enough to fill a channel?
Right, that's true.
Well, that's the other thing.
Recording the high school games and stuff like that.
That takes more than one person. Those are the things that
that's
you
the problem.
require.
That's true.
Talking big
Much
budget
more
right
than
Yeah.
one person.
Probably that and then some.
Yeah. You can't hire no one for $50,000, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
But it takes more than, like Twyla said, it takes more than one person to do that when you're doing it.
To me, I think we should just leave it as it is, and, put the language in,
option of it.
put the language in the
Option for down the
contract for
road,
the
okay.
future councils, that if they want to do it, then they can do
Because I
that.
don't think that language is currently in your expired contract. So it would be new language
Everyone
that
will
we
have
would
that
add
option
in.
there for future councils.
Okay.
Okay, good.
We don't need a vote on this.
Nope.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, please.
Order 2015-251, the school budget validation referendum timeline and October-November council meeting schedule.
Do you want to go over it, Twyla?
The timeline?
Sure.
For the school budget validation referendum, the school proposes that the council, that the school committee would come back and discuss the amount for the budget on August the 24th, and the school committee would make a final vote August the 31st. They proposed the first publication and notice in the ad in the paper on September the 2nd. 15 days later, we'd hold the public hearing on September 17th. Well, I guess the second notice would go in September 17th, and the public hearing would be for September the 22nd, which is the same date that the council would vote to adopt the school budget, ordering the ballots, and the referendum would take place on October the 20th.
Does council have any questions on this? I had talked with Twyla earlier today, because one of my concerns is, if this goes back out to vote and it fails again, where would that land us? Because how I was working with the calendar, we couldn't achieve to put that budget on the November 3rd ballot.
No,
So
you'd be going to December then.
it'd be going to December.
It's about a 2-month
And
process.
in talking with Twyla, it's, the only way we'd be able to do it is if we didn't have to have public hearings. It appears we have to have the, notices, correct?
The way to shorten it was to shorten the absentee period for ballots. And if you were to shorten that period of time to circulate absentees, then you would change the October the 20th date to maybe October the 6th. And then there was some discussion over whether there was a requirement for the public hearing process
Mhm.
as well.
Right, I've looked at the charter and the statute on adoption of budgets. And I believe that the best reading of the statute is that, and the charter, is that the requirement for posting of a public hearing twice 14 days apart applies to adoption of the initial budget, but that it does not apply to subsequent votes on a budget that fails. I can provide a more detailed legal opinion on that, but there's language in both the charter and the statute that supports that. So I believe that the time frame that you're governed by is to schedule the meeting to adopt the new budget, for the council to adopt the revised budget at least 10 days, but no more than 45 days after the referendum vote.
Mhm.
There is no statutory requirement for a public hearing. I think I would suggest that the council consider nevertheless holding a public hearing, which could either be in advance of your, before the date that you vote on the budget, or as you've done in the past, on the night that you vote on the budget. But in either event, I think it makes sense to still consider holding a public hearing. But I don't believe that you have to give the two separate published notices 14 days apart for the subsequent votes on the school budget.
That's good to know. With that knowledge, I don't know, did you work anything out in that scenario with a time frame or not?
Then if you're not looking at a public hearing requirement, once the school committee gives you a budget, then that sounds like 10 days. We would need to, not less.
I mean, it wouldn't
not
even
less
need
than
to
10
be,
days, so
the 10 days is at least 10 days after the
election.
date that the August 11th date, when it failed.
The-
So it appears that the school committee plans to take their final vote on the budget on August 31st, so I think you could
That's the 10 days.
plan to have your budget meeting anytime after the August 31st date.
But we would still have to would only have to do a notice in the paper if we're gonna have a public hearing, correct? We have to do that initial first notice in the paper is for the public hearing. You're saying we don't have to have a second notice?
Right, you don't have to wait 2 weeks.
Okay.
And have a second notice.
I personally think we should still have a public hearing just because we have in the past to let the public have an opportunity to speak. But I would just want to take a second to briefly see if I can work these numbers or these dates here to adjust this October 20th to see if we can somehow get another vote in there for November 3rd if need be. I don't even know if it's even possible, so I just want to look at it real quick.
Yeah, I don't think you'll make that one.
Let's see.
If they're gonna vote the 31st,
That's the 31st. They could potentially vote on it on
next meeting would be the 15th.
If the school committee gives you the figures on August 31st, then
Could potentially be the
we would
public
do
hearing.
a notice on the 2nd.
That's what I was thinking.
And then you hold the public hearing, what's the next Tuesday after
The
that?
The 8th is the next Tuesday, our next meeting is the 15th, but
Your next meeting is the 15th?
our next
17th?
meeting would be the 15th,
15th,
but
okay. So that would sound like you're trying to meet the 15th for a public hearing date?
Or if we,
Cancel
I was gonna
adoption.
say, if they haven't done the 31st, what's the minimum time we have to give?